I grew up in Lexington, Kentucky, spent the first 22 years of my life there. And in that time, never moved, never had to change schools, never had to learn new streets or figure out the best way to get home. I literally had the same house until I left home. Carmen also grew up in Lexington, and because both mine and Carmen's parents remained in Lexington once we moved away, we still made frequent trips back there. We still do. Driving back in after we'd been gone for a couple of years, we couldn't help but honestly just kind of rubberneck coming in from the east of Lexington. All these new housing developments, new malls, even new roads. As amazing as that was, there was also this unsettling feeling. We love the new, but we don't lose the old. Thankfully, while some things for sure have changed, over the decades, not everything. It's kind of nostalgic for me just driving back through the old neighborhood where my friends and I once rode bikes. Everywhere where I played Little League baseball, where a couple friends and I played pranks on each other. Even the house that I grew up in still hasn't changed. Just new roof, new paint. There's something comforting about things not changing. There's something that I like about the stuff that's consistent, especially since so much around us evolves. A lot's been torn down to make way for newer homes, but our house still sits there, and that just feels good. The consistency brings stability. Hey, look, we've been talking about being anchored in Jesus and connecting to that anchor through prayer, through the Word, through relationships with other Jesus followers. Being anchored to Jesus provides us this consistency, a stability. It's an even stronger sense of stability than I get, when I drive back through my old neighborhood. Because while almost everything around us changes, some good changes, some not so good, the way of Jesus endures. It doesn't change, and there's one reason why. Hebrews 13:8 tells us what that reason is, and it states very matter-of-factly that Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Think about that. Jesus never changes. He's always the same. And more than the comfort, again, of going back to the old neighborhood that hasn't changed, there's this monster big confidence that we have in Jesus that we honestly often don't think about. He doesn't change, ever. Like, I don't have to worry if he's growing tired of loving people. I have no concern that he's changed his mind on what is right or wrong. I don't have to worry if his character is eroding or if he's as kind as he used to be. He's still as honest as always. He's still humble. He still has a special heart for the oppressed. He still has a deep draw toward the brokenhearted. He's not evolving or growing tired. Now, the theological word for that is that God is immutable. It simply means that God doesn't change. He doesn't alter, even in the slightest. But that's a lot more than just some theological statement made by a bunch of people locked away in some office. God's immutability makes a difference. It does something to us. Remember back to Hebrews 6:19, we talked about this earlier, that he is the anchor for our soul. That makes us, because he is, it makes us firm and secure. Anchors don't move. And when we're anchored to Jesus, who never changes, that also makes us firm. It keeps us stable, and it gives us a steadfast spirit. And here's what that looks like. When you're anchored, you have, here's the word, conviction. A conviction is a belief or a practice that we hold on to. We don't give up. In this sense, convictions, as I'm using the word, they don't change. Just like Jesus doesn't change, convictions don't change. Much of what many of us cling to in our beliefs are preferences, not convictions. Preferences are those things that I cling to, but very, very loosely. It's like a preference that I have for a certain flavor of ice cream. I prefer it until I get tired of it. Or a preference for a restaurant. We choose a particular place, and it's our favorite, and until something better comes along, or our preference for a particular sports team. But after a decade of losing seasons, or a coach that we're not thrilled with, and we might lose interest and no longer follow them. Our preference has changed. In fact, we call people like that fair weather fans. Why? Because preferences changes just like the weather, and some fans change like that. They change like the weather as well. Hey, let me just remind you of something. Jesus isn't looking for fans, because fans come and go. Jesus is looking for people that are much more than fans. He's desiring us to have convictions about him, and convictions don't change like preferences do. When Jesus is only one of my many preferences, my soul is very, very shaky. Jesus is looking for people who don't shift, and they don't change. He's looking for people to have conviction, and anchoring in Jesus gives us that. Again, convictions don't change over time, and while other people may have faith preferences, we're not called to have that. We're called to have convictions. He calls me to have him and his way as my anchor, and that anchor is a conviction that's to be unwavering and unshakable, because anchors don't move. They anchor. There's a story in Acts chapter 27 about Paul and his travels, and he's on this ship, and it's getting perilously close to the shore in the midst of this wild storm. Let's see, in verse 41 of chapter 27 tells us what happened. It says this: "But they struck a reef where two seas met and ran the ship aground, and the prow stuck firmly and remained immovable, while the stern started to break up due to the force of the waves." The problem was that the ship was stuck and it was immovable, and that became a problem. Look, your and my problem often is that we're immovable on issues that shouldn't be immovable, that we honestly need to change on. We become stubborn, we become hardened, we become unwilling to bend, and that's a problem. And some of that inflexibility needs to change. But there are issues of faith in the way of Jesus in which we need to be immovable, unshaking, unwavering. We need to have convictions. You get that? Having convictions, we need to have convictions about trusting in Jesus and the manner in which he calls us to live. If I'm a follower of Jesus, which I am, then I should have some strong convictions, not simply preferences, on some things like these, like my attitude towards money and whose it is. I should have convictions on my behavior towards those who offend me. I should have these unwavering, unshaking beliefs on my conduct, when nobody else is watching me, my sexuality, and all that is included, with gender and attraction and my behavior in that regard. So how do I determine my convictions? Well, by diving deep into the way of Jesus and his code. Being immovable in our faith because of Jesus, our anchor, it's a great thing. In 1 Corinthians 15:58, Paul gave us this challenge to Jesus' followers. Right after he talked about the resurrection of Jesus, he said this: "Therefore, my beloved brethren, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that your toil is not in vain in the Lord." You get that? Be steadfast, immovable. That's a conviction that doesn't move. We don't shift around. He's the definition of being stable. James talked about that as well in his passage that Todd talked about earlier. In James 1, verse 7-8, he said, "Of those who are asking for direction, let not that man expect that he'll receive anything from the Lord, being a double-minded man." Here's the word: unstable in all his ways. One of the most impressive things that happens as we anchor to Jesus through Bible study and prayer and fellowship is that God makes us people of conviction. He makes us people who are stable. And I, just like you, have been the profound recipient of the incredible influence of people of conviction. They're people who don't just have preferences about Jesus. They're people who have strong beliefs and strong commitment to Him. I think of several more aged couples in my life who've had strong, strong faith. And it shaped their marriages. It shaped how they conducted themselves in every area of their life. And I'm not idealistic to think that they're perfect. But there are so many things about them that I'd love to imitate. They just dripped with this attractive stability, and they had this confidence that they wouldn't fail. Conviction in Christ does that. And I think of my close friend Kevin, who walked hand in hand alongside his wife over several years as she battled cancer, all the way into her final breath here. And as I think about what they walked through together, and as we talked through he and I was grateful for the example of a man who loved his wife well, all the way to the end. Not when it was convenient, and it wasn't always enjoyable, when it was hard, and it would have been so much easier to just not serve as well as he did. There were times that she didn't express gratitude. Why? Because she was sick, and she was hurting. But he loved her very, very well. And I spoke to him on multiple occasions, and I thanked him just for the example that he set for his own kids and my kids as well. And it was the power of convictions. He didn't prefer Jane, his wife. He had a conviction that he would give. Why? Because he loved her. And this was his response. He said, "I'm just doing what God called me to do. I'm just doing what I said I would do." And that's what conviction does. I'm very, very thankful for what he and others have done. Hey, listen, conviction doesn't grow in a moment. It doesn't grow just in a heartbeat. It takes time. So what now? Here's my question. I'll close with this. What do I do now? Hey, I need conviction. Hang in there. Convictions don't show themselves just in a moment. They develop over time, spans of time. Hold on to Jesus as the anchor of your faith. And if it's difficult right now, would you pause and just give thanks for what He's developing in you? Because one of those developing things is conviction. It is a weak faith that has Jesus as a preference, but it is a beautiful and stable faith, and it is so attraction of what God is building in you through difficulties as you just hang on. So hang on. But there are some instances where you need to not hang on. And honestly, you just kind of need to let go and jump.